Hey guys, what is up? Kid here, bringing you another deck profile, this time on Phantom Monarch Alice, the Umbra Evil Alice, basically. I said in a prior video that I'd be bringing this deck out. I finally got enough time to do it, along with having to rebuild the deck. If you weren't aware, shout out, your decks had their database basically wiped, and so I had to rebuild this deck from memory because I kept playing this mostly online and not really playing with the physical cards too often. But this is kind of where the list ended up at last I remembered, and I've been playing it a lot since and made some changes since then, so maybe it's good that that I had to rebuild this deck from memory and then start playing it more again just to make sure everything worked. But this list is a lot of fun. I don't know really how strong it is at the end of the day. It has what I think is one of the most unique ways to find win conditions, essentially, against decks, along with it being very frustrating for opponents to really deal with. If you're not aware, Alice Phantom Monarch's best thing that she has going is that she has infinite healing, essentially. So it's really hard to really close games out against her if you're trying to play grinding games. But biggest weakness is that, if you're able to do 20 or take 22 damage in one swing and you don't have a way to stop it, Alice loses the game, because it doesn't matter how much healing you do. If you do their health total plus some extra, they're going to lose the game. So let's just get into the deck itself, and then I kind of explain the strategy as we go along here. So we're on Spirit of Fire. I think getting the Proxy of Vault called Mantle of the Abyss is really big for this deck. Not only does it put you up a card, essentially, so you get +1 influence, but you do get to start abusing one of the ban cards, Rile of the Abyss, which has been obnoxiously good in this list, just because obviously it was meant for Alice to be played. We play a lot of Spectre cards, which means we get to filter a lot very often with this list, and the fact that it's fast speed means the turn you do Mantle of the Abyss at Recollection and then get it back into your hand means the very next turn you get to start popping off with it as soon as you want. But yeah, so back to this Spectre of Fire. There is I guess a reason to not play Spectre of Fire. You play Serene, I believe, which is the heal 6. You could play that as well, because a lot of the fire cards later in the game no longer matter once you start setting up your, essentially, what I call a lock. But I play Spirit of Fire because I feel like the hand account is really important in this. We want to keep a high influence when possible, because as the game goes on, we're going to get into a situation where we're going to have like a bajillion ways to draw the exact card we want. And the idea is that we have to get there as soon as possible. We don't have access to a lot of float, so we either have to get lucky with float to be able to naturally level, or we're going to have to banish down our hand size. So keeping our hand up is pretty important, in my opinion. Alice Distorted Queen, a very strong card. On enter, we get the Phantasma Goria Mastery, then we put 2 haunt counters on it. This is what is going to generate our basically advantage as the game goes on. But once we get a lot of haunt counters on that, and we're able to cycle our deck and pick the exact card we want to draw every turn, that's when this deck becomes the most broken, I would say. And then the lineage release is very, very strong as well, because we can get a really huge healing. Our lineage will get very, very big very quickly, which is really nice for this lineage release, meaning that our opponent has to not only play around a lot of our healing, but the fact that we have a lineage release as well access to. Alice Phantom Monarch, obviously level 2. The biggest thing about this is that we get access to advanced elements as soon as possible. That's basically the big payoff for the deck, in my opinion. Backup Charger, go up a hand. Also, we play one of Turbocharge that we can eventually guarantee into our hand to go up 1 influence at least, which is nice, and then banish away the Turbocharging when you don't need it. To kill Seal here, this card is, I've been going back and forth on it. Really depends on what meta you're expecting to run into. If you're playing into other slower decks, like other decks trying to go to level 3, then this is totally fine, I think. But if you're playing against a very aggressive aggro meta, people are staying at level 1 more often, then you want to go back to Terrafring. There we go. Lost it for a second. Forgot the name for a second. GCR. So I'm also been going back and forth on running GCR or not. Sometimes this deck, due to how it can kind of be very slow or bricky if you don't open up the right things eventually, having a turn where you just GCR and draw a card at level 1 is still going to be really good. We don't have to wait to go to level 3 to get our free GCR, essentially, and then wait a turn on that. So I felt like GCR is a little bit better, oddly enough, in this deck. Unless we're trying to just turbo out. If you're able to turbo out more often and think that like a Tri-Castle lock is going to be way better, then just go ahead with the turbo option and play the Lost Providence. But G-Star, I think, is a very good option because of how this deck doesn't always have the cards you need immediately to be able to really pop off. Nullifying Lantern is in the list because we can get access to a lot of our Umbra cards in Grave through Ephemeral. Once Nullifying is on the board, this also plays into the aggro decks where we can remove their ability to kindle, essentially, as well as we can deal with like Genbu and stuff like that. At least make them have an answer for it. It's unfortunate we can't really protect it too often, but Nullifying is still a very powerful card in this list. Onric Key, it's just basically our backup charge that also gives us a honk counter. The fact that you have to pay for is kind of awkward sometimes, but eventually you'll be able to pay for to go up a card from this. Safeguard Amulet, just more ways to protect ourselves. I think that's very important for this list. At the end of the day, we just want to delay the game as long as possible till our win conditions are online and we just kind of lock them out of the game. Like I said earlier, Mantle of the Abyss, Alice bonus, really good card. We go up a card and we get access to Ral of the Abyss. Devouring Malice is a card I've been kind of, I think, it hit or miss. I could totally see this card just going away, replacing it with forgetting the name, Blood Chalice or whatever it's called. That card where you get to sack it, draw 2 if you're at 20 or more damage, essentially. There's a lot of ways in this deck where you can kind of push yourself in that direction. But other than that, Devouring Malice kind of does the same thing, but also has the upside of having 2 extra effects that we can have access to if needed. A lot of times how I play this card is that I'll put 1 to 2 counters on it and don't necessarily use it until I feel like I have to use it for a certain reason. So we're always threatening 3 extra damage or debuffing something that's going to be attacking or we need to remove out of the way. And then Ticket to the Afterlife, which is really big on getting as much value as possible and incremental healing every turn. We get an extra recover 2, as well as being able to remove cards we don't want to see anymore in our grave that are Spectre cards to get that heal 2. On to the main deck here. So first, Liminal Guide. Obviously, we're on Liminal Guide. Card's insane, obviously, for this deck because it is a Spectre card. This is another reason why we want to get Mantle of the Abyss going earlier at level 1 before going to level 2, because hopefully the idea here is that we get a couple Liminal Guides into the grave as soon as possible if we get that high roll going, and then we get a big influence boost going into level 2. Next is Purification as a 1-of. This card is very cool in this list for the sole reason that this lets us cycle our curses. So a lot of our curses are, basically a lot of our curses are very powerful. So I'm just going to skip to some of them here. We are going to be playing, where is it? Here, Maledictum, Vitae, or whatever. I can't read cards, okay? But basically, what's really cool is that we obviously want this when we go to level 2 or before level 2 with Nullifying Lantern into our lineage. That way, we don't get the negative effect of playing an Advanced Element card and taking 7 damage from Alice Phantom Monarch's effect. So when this is in there, though, and we need a lot of healing, and we have the influence to deal with it, we can do things where we like play Purification to remove a couple of these, and then if we have the seal out, we just pay 1, put it back underneath once again to heal 4 again. And then on top of getting the Purification healing as well. Another cool trick about this card is if you see we have the 1 of Umbra Sight, we can start a loop going where we Umbra Sight, take some damage, basically if we want to draw 2 cards essentially, and then we set it up on our draw order where we draw into Umbra Sight, and then we Umbra Sight, take the damage, draw into Purification, then use Purification to remove the Umbra Sight and other cards, heal down, and then put the curses back in to heal up again. And then we recycle our deck again, and then use Purification and Umbra Sight again and again to build up our influence if we need it or we're looking for cards that way. It's a very interesting way to like kind of get extra cards to get back the influence into your hand, so you can make a lot of plays over and over again and just do a lot of things on your turn if needed. It's very cute. I like it right now. It's just a lot of fun. I enjoy it. It's worth trying out, I think. Purification is a very interesting card, how it works with this deck, just because of how our curse card, our main curse card, is being able to be used from grave, and then we get to detach it, then reattach it in the same turn. We get really huge chunks of healing without having to like look for other ways to heal, and it's just really frustrating for our opponent to deal with. The big thing about Purification being at 1, especially with all these other 1-ofs, is that at usually around the mid game, if you've been playing properly and not getting completely screwed by drawing only Umbra cards before going to level 2, is that you can start setting up where you pick the exact card you want to draw every single turn, which gets pretty obnoxious at some point. Next, one of Regal Inquisition. This is another win condition for us. So once we get into the stage of being able to go through our deck over and over and over again and picking the exact card we want to draw, we get to basically go draw Regal, play Regal, remove any threats, or if we're trying to like deck them out, we can just be like, yeah, get a whole new hand, and then at the end of turn, cycle our deck, put Regal back on top, and then draw it again next turn, play it again over and over again to either one, remove all any threats out of their hand over and over again, which means every turn they will never get to have, like, they have to, the turn they draw their threat, they have to play it immediately. Otherwise, they are going to just lose it out of their hand if they're not ready to deal with it or whatever. It makes Regal really powerful in that sense, which I like a lot. And then Regal itself is just a really powerful card into certain matchups. Next, we play 3 Topsy Decree. One of the weaknesses to the deck is just taking like random big chunks of like a fireball or something like that. Topsy Decree will help us not only deal with our opponent's influence, it will by making them discard a card, but we also can gain spell shot from it. And then if we need to, we can banish 2 cards from our opponent's memories to go ahead and kind of force them into awkward scenarios where they're wasting extra hand thinking they were going to get float. And then what's nice, once again, is that our defensive cards basically can be cycled once we get into the mid to late game to always draw the answer over and over and over again at some point. And then it's just going to be too much pressure for your opponent to truly deal with if you go into this loop cycle of constantly being like Topsy Decree, make you discard, gain Spell Shroud, or banish 2 cards from your opponent's grave, and then recycle into Topsy Decree next turn. So you keep having the Topsy Decrees going, cycling them over and over again. Once you get like 2 of them, 1 in grave, 1 in hand, you just cycle it like that. It's really obnoxious. Tri-Castle is another card. It's really weird because I really like this card in the list because the games you're allowed to hit level 2 very quickly and drop a Tri-Castle, sometimes you just win the game automatically. If your opponent doesn't play any advanced elements, they're going to have to start basically losing multiple cards, unfortunately, to just really interact with you. And if they don't remove Tri-Castle, it's like another fake 8 health you have to essentially soak up, because a lot of times those decks will need to remove Tri-Castle at some point if they really want to be able to compete with you. Otherwise, they're just going to get locked out of the game. And once again, if your Tri-Castle gets removed, you're fine with that a lot of the times because you can just cycle right back into it again. It's really obnoxious how this deck can lock people out of the game. One of Turbocharge for the draw, because we do play backup charger, go up in influence, why not? Sometimes you high roll it early, later in the game when you get to kind of pick what you want to draw, you get the Turbocharge when you need it. Undying Dreams is our only floating memory, as well as it is a fake win condition that can create some of your ephemeral objects or ephemeral allies get out of control very quickly, because once again, when you're in the mid phase of the game, mid to late game, every turn you can just be like, Undying Dreams, my guy gets a buff counter. Undying Dreams, my guy gets a buff counter. Cycle into the thing. Undying Dreams, my guy gets a buff counter. Cycle into Undying Dreams. Undying Dreams, my guy gets a buff counter, until they either have to answer the ally or they lose the game because the pressure from it. What I like to do is usually get a liminal guide out from leveling up to Alice level 2 and then try to Undying Dreams it. So you just start buffing it and then cycle back into another Undying Dreams once we're in the mid to late game over and over again to apply pressure that way onto the board. And then that also lets you clear most things out from your opponent. A lot of times too, your thing can get, if you're fast enough, you can get so big that, dragons don't even matter anymore, because if they flip into the dragon, you just swing into it and they lose their dragon. It's pretty wild when that happens. Unyielding Wraithguard is so important for this deck just because it accomplishes a lot for you. Not only is a stopgap measure into aggro, it also generates you more honk counters for your mastery, but then because it breaks up how the damage is taken, they can't just be like swing for 4 to get rid of like a frog, for example. In this case, they'll have to swing twice to remove it or use 2 things to remove it. And what's really nice about this card too is that it does sort of combo with Cremation Ritual, where you can play it, cremate it, and you still have the 0-2 taunt on the board. You got a honk counter and you drew 2 cards essentially to replace itself, plus the Cremation Ritual. If there's a way, if there's a way to play Library Witches in this list or clear up some space, maybe Hasty isn't that good. We just go into Library Witch instead and have the Cremation Rituals plus us that way as well. Unyielding Wraithguard, though, has been really good at stopping any decks that require attacking, it's obviously very annoying when your opponent plays Dream Fairy or something like that to put it back into your hand, because then we're going to have to find a way to remove the Dream Fairy, which is kind of awkward in this list sometimes. Next, Creative Shock. We want to pitch certain cards and fire, obviously. We can pitch our floating if we need to. We can pitch liminal guides that way. Pitch our curse cards if we draw into it, so we can make sure to activate our curse cards once we go to level 2 to go ahead and put it underneath so we don't have to take that damage from activating curse cards, essentially, because of Alice Phantom Monarch's effect, or quote-unquote downside, essentially. Creative Shark helps us dig faster as well, which is really important to fill up the grave as soon as possible and just try to start, cycling through and finding things we need. 3 cremation rituals. This is just, we draw, we pop one of our dudes, and then we plus that way over time, or at least get some value that way. A lot of times it's like Hasty Messenger swings in a couple times. We find a cremation ritual, we cremate away the Hasty when it's no longer useful, and just draw into other things. For Hasty Messengers, once again, I think what's so important about this deck is finding your curse card as soon as possible and getting it into the yard, or using, Nullifying Lantern once it's in there to be able to put it underneath Alice, because that's the awkward part for Alice. It is a bit of a drawback having to take 7, but a lot of the times, if you have to, you'll just play a card from hand to go ahead and take the 7 and then heal back down anyway. But Hasty Messenger helps you get there a lot quicker. And it's quite annoying too, behind a Unyielding Wraith Guard and a Hasty Messenger. That Hasty Messenger is probably going to live for at least 2 turns. 2 of Reduced to Ash. It's kind of awkward. I kind of want to play this as like 3, maybe even 4 sometimes, depending on the matchup. Maybe there should be a 3rd or 4th one in the sideboard. But if anyone's playing Censor, that's really bad for you, as well as the Teacups. I forget the name of the card, but it subtracts your healing, which is like pretty bad for you. Once you get into the late game, though, the healing doesn't really matter. The teacups don't matter as much. It's usually the early game that it matters, because the little healing you can get is really important to stabilize, especially into aggro matchups. But late game, the teacups don't matter as much. It probably helps you in a little bit, because your opponent can't heal as well. 3 of Hearts. This card too is a card I've been going back and forth on. Like, maybe this should be just 3 Library Witches, but 3 of Hearts is still a very solid opener. You go down 3, you get to swing in for 2, and then if your opponent tries to remove it, you get to use the Cardistry effect to draw a discard and like maybe set up a float, maybe set up a liminal guide, which is important, and just being able to dig. What's nice once about this deck is that you can cycle back into 3 of Hearts over and over again, so you can keep using its effect if you want to cycle once you get into the mid game. It doesn't really come up that often, but it is an option that can come up. Abnegation is one of the biggest ways we can stabilize in this deck. A lot of times Abnegation, once you get into the late game, is just basically going to be kind of like a heal for 16 most of the time. It gets pretty insane. The ephemeral bonus doesn't come up too often, but keep that in mind when you have one in the yard. This is why we play more than 1, obviously, and it's really important to see multiple copies at some point. But occasionally remember that if you are playing into water or something and then negate something, you can always be like, okay, ephemerate, abnegation, at least I'm going to heal 16 here in response. Bandersnatch is one of our bigger allies that once again helps us heal. We don't really use its sacrifice and ally effect too often, but when the board gets kind of wild into these aggro matchups and a cleave for 4 will win it, kind of stabilize us, why not? It's really good in that case. And also it's a huge taunt that's quite annoying sometimes. Once again, the curse card is really important. You want to see this as soon as possible, either in your hand or in the grave, so you can start putting it under your Alice and not having to deal with all of the negative side effects of being level 2. Remnant of Will is one of the ways, we help stabilize by healing 4, but it also puts more haunt counters onto our mastery. This is the way we kind of push ourselves in the mid game to get enough haunt counters to start cycling. Usually when you're around around 16 or so haunt counters, which feels pretty, at first you think it's kind of hard, but once you start to get the deck going, it becomes fairly easy to get a lot of haunt counters, and that's usually the time of the game where you have 16 or so haunt counters, maybe 14, where you can kind of start choosing the exact card you want to draw, due to the fact that you're banishing a lot of cards from your grave to do other effects, but your deck size gets a lot smaller because also you're using a Hasty Messenger, Creative Shock, and everything like that to keep your deck size somewhat low from drawing so much and cycling so much, that you get to pick the exact card you want to draw every turn. And this is one of the ways you get to that point. And it's nice that when you have a Ticket of the Afterlife, you get to play this for free. So you pay 1, heal 4, gain 2 haunt counters, then banish this from grave using Ephemerate for 0, essentially. And then you get another 2 haunt counters and heal for 4 again. Really, really powerful card for the deck. Shackled Thurgis, once again, is another really powerful card in this list. So decks that don't have allies to sack to this end up having to just take the 4 damage. What's a cool little trick you can do with this is you can play Shackled Thurgis and then Cremation Ritual it, force them to sack something. If they don't have something, then it comes back as a 4, was it like a 4/4 that you can just start swinging with. So it becomes a threat in itself. I used to play 4. I felt like having 4 was too much, but you know, it probably depends on the meta. Shackled Thurgis too, when like they only have like the Seiryu out, for example, and you just Shackled Thurgis and just Cremation Ritual it, boom, you're gone. They have to sack their dude. It's pretty funny when it happens. It's surprisingly how good of a card it is, because it always forces your opponent to 1-for-1, and if they ever use a spell or something to remove it, then they have to sack something else as well. Otherwise, it comes back once again as another taunt. Like I said earlier, that attacking into Alice is probably the least efficient way for your opponent to actually put damage on you and win the game, unless they can push one big push of damage that way. We play a lot of taunts in this list to force our opponent into very awkward scenarios if they don't play like spell cards to do damage to us. Spectral Haunting here is mostly for getting our Bandersnatch back a lot of the time. I used to play this as 4, and as the more I played the deck, the more this got cut, and we kind of like just set it up to be at like 2 now, essentially. So you either draw one or you can banish one later, and then you end up playing this to play one of your Bandersnatch from grave a lot of the time. It's the same reason I used to play 4 Bandersnatch, but as time went on, I cut it more and more because I felt like it wasn't as important to the deck. It's still a very powerful card, obviously, but you know, Spectre Haunting plus Bandersnatch combo isn't like the biggest thing. There are other combos we could probably play in this deck. You can play with Spectral Haunting, especially later in the game. So it's worth exploring that if you'd like. But I'm just kept the list like this as of now. So Suffocating Miasma is the true obnoxious win condition for this deck. The deck works very well with this card because we essentially create a lock for our opponent where either they have to do 22 damage in the one swing to Alice, essentially, otherwise we're going to live forever, essentially, which means Suffocating Miasma over time is just going to cause them to, 1, lose a bunch of allies, as they're going to have to keep putting debuff counters on things. It's very easy for us to imbue, so not only do we get to answer something on the board or make something go to 0 attack a lot of the time, you can make a Seiryu go down to 0 attack, and I believe once they're at 0 attack, they can't really swing anymore, which is another way to kind of like stop our opponent from doing anything too insane with their Seiryu, for example. And then on top of that, if they're not playing an ally-heavy deck, they're going to have trouble ever putting debuff counters on anything, which means they're going to take 2 unpreventable damage every turn over and over again until they slowly lose the game. We're literally suffocating them to death, just like the card says. I'm surprised how well this card works in this list, and what's really nice about this, even though there's like a lot of fractal hate going around right now, whenever they destroy this Fantasia, it's fine for you. You don't care, because you know why? You get to just draw it next turn every time. You just go, okay, yeah, that's fine. I'll cycle my deck, and now I put it back on top of my deck. It's the next card I'm going to draw next turn. I'm just going to play Suffocating Miasma again, and they're going to have to deal with it. And eventually they're not going to have enough answers to the Suffocating Miasmas that they will get suffocated out of the game, essentially. They will get choked to death. And then finally, like I talked about earlier, the One of Umbracite, it's another curse card we can play. A lot of times we're going to take 9 damage if we play this without having another curse card already in our lineage, which is kind of awkward. But, you know, luckily we have a lot of heal in this deck. So once you get the Umbra under there, you can go ahead and heal away that damage. Like I said, this is probably why Chalice might be a good choice here, because we can force ourselves to go ahead and take damage to make ourselves at 20 and like ride that high of being able to draw 2 off of Chalice, though it's probably not that great, but it is an option, honestly. But Umbracite, it feels very good. Another way for us to go up in influence, which is really important. Finally, this is our sideboard here, Nullifying Mirror. I'm just playing things in the side that kind of like make it awkward for our opponent, things we have to play around, so we can shut off people from imbuing if we want. We can shut off Failing Breeze and stuff where we're swinging in for things like that. against Luxem, I guess, as well. We can handle that as well. Orb of Sealing for not Abnegation, Oblation Seal. If the deck's not as popular anymore, but it's still popular enough that I think you have to keep in mind. Same thing with, what is the card name or the deck name? Arsana as well. We can get rid of a lot of their bolts, essentially, to make their bolts a lot weaker, which is very good for us. That way their bolts never get to a point where they can just like blow us up, essentially. 2 Regal Inquisitions, because in the matchups that it really matters, seeing multiple is really good, especially when we're trying to deck our opponent out in those instances when we know the deck our opponent out at line is very strong. Harrow of the Saved is an interesting card I've been messing around with. In the matchups you know that are going to go really, really long and you lose a lot of your Spectre stuff, you can kind of revive a lot of your Spectre stuff to like hold off on your opponent and hold off on you decking yourself out, essentially. But it does make the deck very weird in a sense that once you do Harrow the Saved, you need to make sure that you're not milling your deck a lot unless you know you're doing lines that will lead to a victory, because usually the timing for this card when you use it, it does cause issues where you're at the point where you're like milling 20 cards every time you do your mastery effect, and that starts making things very awkward. So usually when you do this, you're like moving like 15 plus cards back into your grave and then putting them back in your deck, essentially, so you can kind of like bolster your deck a little bit. We have 3 Lost Promises. This is for the extreme aggro lines where we have to deal with our opponent, for example, using cleave or something like that. At least that will remove it or stop the cleave, essentially, and then we can do some extra damage on top. It's nice that this card as well will let us play it for free from memory. So if we need a combat trick and our hand is down, we have a way to still play it. A lot of times, though, if you're putting this in, you probably want to bring in at least 1 Harrow the Saved so you can have a way to recycle those cards you banished, because in those instances, then your deck size becomes so tiny you could accidentally deck yourself out. Nocturne's Oblivion, just a good way to answer things that we want to blow up off the board that are non-champion objects. So really solid card overall. But yeah, that's the deck. It's really a deck built around locking your opponent out of the game and slowly choking them to death, essentially, using miasmas, using Regal Inquisition cycles, locking them out with Tri-Castles, doing infinite healing with Maledictum and Purification combos, stuff like that. You can get Liminal Guides out of control. Liminal Guide with Undying Dreams is one of my best ways to build the threat over time against our opponent, because a lot of time a 1/3 they're kind of going to ignore it for a bit sometimes, and if they don't respect when it's out as an ephemeral object, suddenly we're just Undying Dreamsing it multiple times, or like once every turn. It eventually gets out of control and it has too much health for them to deal with, and they just lose the game that way. Excuse me. But yeah, this is the list I've been playing a lot with. It's been a lot of fun. Really recommend it. Try it out at locals. It's really great. I don't think this is kind of like a regional, or not regional. I don't think this is the type of deck that you can bring into Ascent and be like, I'm going to dominate the Ascent, because honestly, at the end of the day, it does have some awkward issues where you just don't find your curses. Your opening hand is just ungodly, a bunch of Umbra. Like I said, you can kind of mitigate that damage by playing like the Serene Spirit, for example, but I feel like the extra card is really important for your hand size in this deck, because we don't have a lot of naturally good ways to generate advantage our influence very well until the late game, and sometimes it's more important just to have the hand size. I don't know, really. I haven't played this deck enough to like make a final call on Serene Spirit or just normal Spirit of Fire. I'm gonna leave that up to you guys. Let me know what you end up deciding to play. But yeah, if you want to try something out that's a lot different and it's a very slow grind of a game, and you like that type of deck style, this is probably a deck for you. Just be sure that when you're in tournament, you're probably only gonna, if your opponent doesn't know to scoop, you're probably only gonna play one game and like finish one game, because the games where my opponents don't scoop as soon as they recognize that they're kind of locked out of the game are the games that I win 1-0, because we never finish the second game. But yeah, if you like this deck profile and you like the content here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It does help the channel grow a lot, and I really appreciate it. I know I've been a little bit away for a bit. Some stuff happened, but I'm kind of going to be posting some more stuff soon. I should be having some more match videos soon. I'm going to try to get some match videos of this Alice deck going. I don't know if it'll be just like through Tabletop Sim or if I bring it to locals sometime later this week, maybe. But yeah, with that being said, hopefully see you guys in the next video. Later, everyone.